Balake. Where is Balake at?
My name's Blake.
Do you want to go to war, Balake? I'm for real. Ron.
Oh, I had my layout all messed up. Well, anyway, here we are. Ron is present. How are you guys doing? Happy Tuesday, SP Nation. Remember, we're here for a little bit more SPTV, where every day is a great day not to be in a cult. Let's talk about the ongoing, the inevitable decline, collapse of Scientology. To anchor this conversation, I want to share with you a really good blog post that Mike Rinder put up this morning. This video, I will admit right from the beginning, is a little more aimed towards the Scientologists who are still inside the bubble, still a little bit on the fence. It's aimed more at that audience than it is people who are not in or have never been in Scientology. But I think many of you will still find this interesting. So let's just jump right into this. There's kind of a lot to discuss here. There's kind of a lot to define here. I'm going to try not to get too lost in the weeds and defining too many things, spending too much time defining things, because again, the real intended audience is people who are still in Scientology. But let's take a look at this. This is Mike Rinder's blog. Link to this blog post is in the description down below. OT 9 and 10 are closer than you think. David Miscavige, April 1993. 30 freaking years ago. Okay, this is a Flag FSM newsletter. Guys, all that means is Flag is the Scientology organization in Clearwater, Florida, and FSM is a Scientologist public who makes money bringing other people into Scientology and convincing them to keep doing more and more in Scientology. They get a commission. They get like 10, 15% commission. And this is and that's what an FSM is. So this is a newsletter that Flag, the biggest Scientology org in the world, is sending out to all of the public who bring new people into Scientology. New OT 9 and 10 are closer than you think. The text to the side of this photo is not actually very relevant to this blog post or this video, but this is David Miscavige at Flag 30 years ago, announcing that new OT 9 and 10 are closer than you think. Captain Miscavige made this announcement more than 30 years ago. Whoa, guys. If we're talking about Captain Miscavige, then we got to take this conversation a little more seriously. All right. Now we can talk about Captain Miscavige. Captain Miscavige made this announcement more than 30 years ago. Had you surveyed anyone who attended this monumental, epic watershed event, what does closer than you think mean? I guarantee not one of them would have said anything beyond 5 years. Most would have responded with 1 or 2 years at most. This once fresh and then moldy and now petrified carrot continues to be dangled in front of the faithful donkeys. Though talk of it has been replaced in the main with self-congratulatory hype about ideal orgs. Now, I said I don't want to fall into the trap of defining too many things, but I just want to put it this way. Saint Hill and Saint Hill size and Saint Hill special briefing course is a word that gets used a lot in Scientology, and people could be understandably very confused. Saint Hill is, it's a city in East Grinstead, Sussex, but it's also the Saint Hill Manor is a big home that L. Ron Hubbard purchased in Saint Hill. And when L. Ron Hubbard purchased that home, it also became the international headquarters of Scientology. The international management. It was an earlier iteration of what is now Scientology's international management. Saint Hill was the hub of all Scientology in the world. So, okay, that's all I'll say. We'll come back to that in a minute. Oh, that's right. So achieving Saint Hill size is something in Scientology where you're supposed to grow a Scientology organization so that its statistics are as high or as big as the statistics of Saint Hill when L. Ron Hubbard was running it. So, and this gets confusing because there's also an org, for example. There are some orgs in Scientology that have Saint Hill in their name. And it has nothing to do with whether they're St. Hill size or, like on L. Ron Hubbard Way in Hollywood, there is an org called the American St. Hill Organization. And that's a completely different thing. So anyway, let's carry on. Okay. Sorry, guys. So St. Hill size used to be what all orgs were trying to achieve. David Miscavige has recently shifted the focus, well, not recently, back in 2003, to doing something called achieving an ideal org. Now, L. Ron Hubbard wrote a policy letter called the Ideal Organization, and it talked about how what a Scientology org should be, even if it wasn't big and beautiful and expensive. There are certain things he wanted a Scientology organization to be. That was called an ideal org. David Miscavige created this thing called the Ideal Org Strategy, which was every church of Scientology had to purchase and renovate a new 50,000 square foot plus building, and magically that would allow all orgs to expand and achieve St. Hill size, because organizations around the world were all struggling to achieve St. Hill size. So Miscavige is like, it's because our buildings are shit. And if we buy these new buildings, if we build it, people will come and the orgs will hit St. Hill size. Okay, let's get back to it. Okay, so Mike says, talk of achieving St. Hill size has been replaced in the main with self-congratulatory hype about ideal orgs. According to this promotional piece, Captain Miscavige, this was back when he didn't mind being called captain, because it identifies him as the head of the Sea Organization and thus controlling all Scientology entities. He now considers it an insult and mockery, according to filings made on his behalf. All right. That broke up the sentence. According to this promotional piece, Captain Miscavige announced the prerequisites for the release of OT 9 and 10. 1, getting one's case in perfect shape and getting through OT 8. 2, getting trained up on this SHSBC, the St. Hill Special Briefing Course, or Class 5 Graduate Auditor Course. See, this is a perfect example of where, you guys like it? Does it fit the conversation? The St. Hill Special Briefing Course in Scientology is the Class 6 Auditor Course. Most people know that on Scientology's Bridge to Total Freedom, on one side of the bridge, you have the auditing levels where you receive auditing, Scientology's spiritual counseling, and you achieve the state of clear. And then you do the confidential OT levels where you learn about Xenu and the body thetans. On the other side of Scientology's Bridge to Total Freedom is the auditor training levels. And the St. Hill Special Briefing Course is called that because it was delivered personally by L. Ron Hubbard at St. Hill in England. The course is largely him giving lectures, and it's also all of his technical bulletins. So it's a huge course. It's considered the biggest course in Scientology. It's considered one of the most important courses in Scientology. All righty. So the prerequisites to release OT 9 and 10 were getting one's case in perfect shape and getting through OT 8, getting trained up to the St. Hill Special Briefing Course or Class 5 Graduate Auditor with all technical specialist courses. We don't have to define that. 3, building all of the orgs to the size of Old St. Hill, and 4, creating a safe environment. Of course, since then, the goalposts have shifted. There is no St. Hill Special Briefing Course for anyone to train on. You might go, what is that? How could there be no course for anyone to train on? Miscavige has canceled the St. Hill Special Briefing Course. He's canceled it. I think it was the end of 2013, Miscavige released what he called the Golden Age of Tech 2. We won't define that right now. And as a part of that, he decided that Scientology's technical bulletin volumes, the big red, fat red books that you can find if you just Google like Scientology technical volumes, that they weren't up to snuff. There was some bad technology in there. Now, the problem is those technical volumes are the course packs for the St. Hill Special Briefing Course. So therefore, until Miscavige re-releases all the technical volumes, there is no St. Hill Special Briefing Course. David Miscavige has canceled the most important auditor training course in Scientology. And that's what's going on here. Okay. Mike continues, but the biggest issue was and is building all orgs to the size of Old St. Hill. It did not happen anywhere. No org achieved this objective. Though a handful were announced as having done so, they promptly collapsed after the video was shot and everybody moved on to the next big thing. Scientology has an incredible inability to do more than one thing at a time. If Miscavige's attention is on something, everyone's attention is on that thing too. And when his attention shifts, the whole top-heavy bureaucracy shifts with him. Back in the 90s, the natives were becoming restless about the lack of St. Hill-sized orgs. In other words, the natives in this case are the OT8s, because the OT8s were told, you're not going to get OT9 and 10. We're not going to release OT9 and 10 until all the orgs are St. Hill size. But the OT8s are like, excuse me, Mr. Little Davy Miscavige, these orgs aren't going St. Hill size. What the hell? What are we waiting for? And so Miscavige was like, oh, I see. You got a problem? You got something you want to complain about? Well, I got a solution for you. And he says Captain Dave's first solution was to tell those who had completed OT8 that they needed to become the executive directors of their local org and build it to the size of Old St. Hill. Of course, if they were unwilling to do that, then they couldn't complain. Some OT8s signed on to this program, and to a one, they were all dismal failures. Now, guys, just imagine this. An OT8, all that means in Scientology is that you have spent thousands of hours getting rid of your body thetans, which most Scientologists don't even know what body thetans are. They've never heard the term because most Scientologists have never made it to OT3. But all that means, like, so if you're OT8, you've spent thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars telepathically getting rid of body thetans. And then on OT8, you learn that most of your past life memories, which is the thing in Scientology, weren't your memories, but they belonged to all of your body thetans. That's all it means to be OT8. Now, imagine thinking that that somehow qualifies you to run an organization. Like, these two things have nothing to do with each other, but Scientologists have this idea that if you're OT8, you have these like magical powers. You're like Gandalf the wizard. Like, your present time experience and work history don't matter, because as an OT8, you are able to tap this bottomless well of knowledge from your 76 trillion years, because people in Scientology think that OT8s have perfect recall of all of their past lives. In fact, L. Ron Hubbard even says that OT8 handles amnesia on the whole track. Whole track is Scientology's word for all of your past lives. So Scientologists actually believe that being OT8 makes you like this superhuman person with this magical knowledge of everything ever. It's so these OT8s were basically pressured to become the executive directors of their local orgs. Needless to say, it failed. Eventually, Miscavige needed a new solution, which is where the ideal orgs came in. This was supposed to be the way that orgs would become the size of Old St. Hill. He announced this breakthrough with great fanfare 10 years later in 2003. In the subsequent 20 years, there have been 50 or so ideal orgs announced. And by the way, guys, not just announced, but he means like actually opened, purchased, renovated, opened. Not a single one of these ideal orgs has achieved the size of Old St. Hill. Guys, if you're in Scientology and you have not come to terms with the fact that not a single ideal org has gotten to the size of St. Hill back in the 60s, then you are truly living inside the Matrix. This ideal org strategy, the thing that you've been bled dry, squeezing blood out of a stone, every dollar and cent, remortgaging your house, cashing in your 401ks, selling assets, going into debt, hundreds of thousands of debt. This was all supposed to be because it's what would result in expansion for Scientology. If you're inside the bubble, you have to open your eyes and confront the fact that this entire strategy has been a scam, a failure, and a distraction. All right, let's keep going. Nobody dares speak out loud what everyone knows. The only thing the Ideal Org program has done is increase Scientology's real estate portfolio. It's been a successful way of raising money, but a complete failure at expanding organizations. Then we come to the last and the most vague requirement for releasing OT9 and 10. Quote, creating a safe environment. This was a get-out-of-jail-free card for Miscavige to be able to use if by some miracle the earlier three requirements were met. In fact, while there has been no progress on the first three requirements, this one has without a doubt regressed dramatically. Scientology's PR is worse than at any time in history. There are new legal and criminal problems raising their heads every week. The influence of Scientology has shrunk as their front groups have been exposed. There are major countries in the world where Scientology is banned or effectively shut down. It is a more unsafe environment for Scientology now than at any time in history. The bottom line is there is no OT 9 and 10. They simply do not exist. But the mirage is kept alive because if there was nothing else in the future, the people who are unfortunate enough to make it to OT8 would walk away. OT8 itself is underwhelming, to put it kindly. And if those who ascend to the top of the bridge were to believe they had reached the pinnacle of all Scientology has to offer, the response would be almost universal. Some would hang on just to keep the status. The shrinking world of Scientology, 2023. This is it's such an on-point blog post that I really had to do a video about it. I've said many times on this channel that, you know, no matter what it is that I'm discussing in my videos, in the back of my mind, the intended audience is people who are still in Scientology. And that I want to put out videos that, even if they're funny and entertaining, as I try to make them out to be, are not so offensive, not so derogatory, not so degrading that a Scientologist watching them would be put off. It's sort of my goal that a Scientologist, if they stumbled upon one of my videos, would be like, "Oh shit, he's speaking negatively about Scientology, but he's being really fair, and everything he's saying is actually accurate." It's why I really take pains not to exaggerate anything on my channel. What Mike has highlighted in this blog post is probably the most on point criticism of Scientology and David Miscavige that an actual Scientologist, the live chat saying we want the hat. Mike's blog post is probably one of the most on-point criticisms of Scientology and David Miscavige that a current Scientologist could accept. Because this criticism, you know, for someone who's still inside the bubble, there's like layers of peeling the onion of getting out of that bubble. One of the last layers is being critical of L. Ron Hubbard himself. As a Scientologist in the bubble, probably the easiest thing to do is to criticize senior managers. And I mean mentally. Like, you're not allowed to criticize senior managers, don't get me wrong. But if someone has a really bad experience in Scientology, or someone feels like there's an injustice, it's not considered like crazy to blame it on some senior executive. Above a senior executive is pointing the finger at David Miscavige. People are very hesitant to point the finger at David Miscavige, never publicly. But privately, many people will whisper in hushed tones that there must be something wrong, even if they don't know exactly what it is. Then you would probably, you know, so I guess my point is, Mike's blog post criticizes Miscavige's expansion strategy. And that is something that really could pierce the veil of, you know, this kind of like shroud of protection that Scientologists have surrounding their ability to think logically. Because any Scientologist can look around at their local city and go, yeah, our ideal org is not the size of Old St. Hill. And in fact, our ideal org has less staff than it had before we had an ideal org building. And our expenses are much higher now that we have this 50,000 square foot facility that we need to heat and cool. And we're making less money because there's less public. And where did all our public go? And why have half my friends been declared and disappeared? Like, guys, you know, I come from originally my Scientology experience was Philadelphia. Like, Philadelphia is where my mom got into Scientology. It's where I was first introduced to Scientology. It's where I was on staff for many, many, many years before joining the Sea Org later in Los Angeles. And I've been to Philadelphia a few times in the last many years. And the Philadelphia org is tiny and is almost vacant and is run down. And they purchased their new ideal org building almost 15 years ago. 15 years ago. And that new, it's like it's this kind of skyscraper building. It's called the Piano Building. It's on like Chestnut Street or Walnut Street. I can never remember. I think it's Chestnut, just south of City Hall. And this giant building has been sitting there vacant, unoccupied, unrenovated for 15 years because there simply aren't enough Scientologists with enough money in the city of Philadelphia or even in the entire Eastern United States to raise the money needed to renovate that building. And so I read this blog post and I was like, what in the world are Scientologists who are in the bubble actually telling themselves about the ideal org strategy? How are they explaining away the failure of the ideal org strategy? Just like Mike's blog post started out with an announcement about OT 9 and 10 are coming out sooner than you think. Boy, I remember when David Miscavige announced the ideal org strategy and that this strategy was now the overriding strategy of Scientology because it handled the problem of creating ideal orgs and it handled the problem of getting OT 9 and 10 released. And I remember being told, this was back in 2003, 2004. I was in the Sea Org in LA. I remember being told Miscavige, COB, we call him, had contracted with this massive international architecture, design, and construction firm to get all ideal orgs in the world built, renovated, and opened in the next 12 months. That is what we were told. That was 20 fucking years ago. And maybe 1/3 of the orgs in the entire world have opened these buildings. Now, just like Mike said, if anyone at that event where they announced OT 9 and 10 are closer than you think, if you'd surveyed the people at that event and was like, well, we're saying it's closer than you think, but how close did you think it was? Nobody would have ever said 5 years. Nobody would have ever said anything more than 5 years. If Miscavige had announced the ideal org strategy, or even the strategy to release OT 9 and 10, that said, guys, we've got it solved. We've got it solved. We've got it all figured out. Everything. We're putting all of our resources behind this plan, and the plan's only going to take 30 years. You know, people ask all the time, is there any way to get rid of Miscavige? Technically, there isn't. But if Miscavige had gotten up on a stage and said, our plan is to have this done in 30 years, people would have figured out how to get rid of him. There might not be any actual mechanism in place to like depose David Miscavige, but people would have figured it out. Because Scientologists aren't giving all their time and their money and their children to Scientology to accomplish some goal that they think is going to happen in 30, 40, 50 years. Scientologists think everything's going to happen in like the next year. Scientologists kind of have tunnel vision. There's no such thing as long-term planning in Scientology, ironically. Everything's always now. I have never seen an annual plan or a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan in Scientology. Such things do not exist. Okay. So for you Scientologists out there, I just ask you, any of you who has even a passing familiarity with everything L. Ron Hubbard wrote on administration and programming and targets and everything, you guys know that management is supposed to be writing programs for expansion. These programs are supposed to result in actual expansion. Expansion is supposed to show up in statistics. By statistics, Scientology has been failing, has been in a danger trend since the very late 80s, early 90s. The only statistic in Scientology that has been uptrending is assets, real estate holdings, and Sea Org reserves. And that's because the appraised value of the ideal orgs, all these real estate assets, go towards the Sea Org reserves stat. So money in the bank has been going up. Every other stat has been going down. Well done auditing hours has been going down. New public on the bridge has been going down. Even income for training and auditing has been going down. Now, donations to the IAS are through the roof. Donations to the ideal org strategy are through the roof. And make no mistake, none of this is to say, and golly gee, if they would just fix all that, Scientology would be fantastic. No, I don't give a damn. I'm not one of those guys who's waiting for Scientology to get better. I didn't like doing Scientology when I was in Scientology. I'm not trying to get back into that. But when the purpose of a message is to get through to someone who's still inside the bubble. You've got to speak to them about something about which they are capable of agreeing with. And even someone who believes in L. Ron Hubbard and believes in Scientology and believes in the tech is capable of agreeing with the fact that David Miscavige's programs for expansion have been an utter failure. And the other thing I think they would be capable of agreeing on if they just took a few minutes to really think about it, and this is actually probably the most important point, OT 9 and 10 do not exist. And if you truly accept that, agree with that, believe in that, and you choose to remain in Scientology anyway, then Xenu bless you. Then fine. Then you deserve all of the abuse that comes your way, to be perfectly honest. If you're willingly going to continue participating in a group that is perpetuating a scam on every single one of its members with this lie of full operating thetan and upper OT levels, and LRH went off to Target 2 to finish his upper level research, it's just all a lie. It's just all a lie. Save your time, save your money, save your children. Stop participating in this scam. It's an absolute scam. Any benefit you think you're getting from Scientology, you can get it elsewhere. Whether it's from something other than Scientology or whether you want to do independent Scientology outside of Scientology. I'm just saying there's no benefit that you're deriving from Scientology that is so valuable that it justifies continuing to support what is a scam. That is, of course, unless you're Grant Cardone and you make most of your money by, duping all of the Scientologists who look up to you. So a scam artist, a fraudster like Grant Cardone has a reason to stay in Scientology. The rest of you really don't. All right, let's take a look at some super chats, guys, and then we'll wrap this up. Bill Kennedy, what positives, if any, did you get out of Scientology? Bill, I appreciate the question. I've answered this question a bunch of times, although I understand most people have never seen any of my other videos. It's not something I really want to spend much time on right now, to be honest. I just don't. I don't see much value in answering this question because, again, a lot of the value that I took away from Scientology wasn't due to Scientology itself, but just due to the nature of the high pressure environment that I was in for so long. So like if I sit here in front of you and I go, my work ethic and dedication is something I took from Scientology. It's like, did you really take it from Scientology? Or did you take it because you were in such a pressure cooker of an environment that's just something you became accustomed to? Do you see what I'm saying? That's an example of an answer in the past I would usually give. Yeah, anyway, that's all I'll say on this. I appreciate the question though, Bill. I do. Okay, Powers V2. Have you had a chance to review Apostate Alex's Scientology business site and his recent breakdown of Scientology's international loan money laundering scheme? No, I have not, but I'll try to check that out. Peter Van State, super sticker. Thank you, Peter. Joni Cummings, Captain Aaron. Is it possible that since Mike came out with his blog, David Miscavige, OSA, and Scientology realized they done messed up? No. Oh, well, do you mean his blog post today or his blog in general? Anything that Mike's pointing out in this blog post is something David Miscavige is well aware of. It's part of the source of Miscavige's increasing paranoia and franticness. He knows that Scientology is failing under his leadership. He knows that if Scientologists truly understood how much Scientology was failing, they would figure out how to get rid of him. It's part of his paranoia. He knows exactly what's going on. Thank you for the question. Lydia von Stretchclaw. Hi, AA Ron. Would you do a Xenu recording translation with Captain Tommy? It would be great. We were talking about it on the lifeboat. Thanks. That would actually be a lot of fun. The only problem is that the recording that I think you're probably referring to is like 90 minutes long. And even if we play it on 2x speed, which honestly, listening to L. Ron Hubbard on 2x speed would be pretty difficult. It would be a really, really long reaction video. So that's my hesitation on that. But otherwise, it would be a lot of fun. Mickey Goldmail. Hello, Sailor. Hello, Mickey. Dave Bowen. Old St. Hill sounds like a line of salad dressings. Well, there you go. I never thought of that one. John Sistofsky. The Scientology ship is sinking. Super cool hat. John, I'm pretty sure you're the one who sent me the hat. So thank you. It is super, super cool. All right, let's see. Sheldon's Cat Mom. I appreciate your channel. You are great, AA Ron. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the kind comment and the super chat. Peter Van Peter, one of these times, tell me how to pronounce this. Peter Van Stitt. I'm not going to get it. I have great faith with all the publicity that you, Mike, Leah, the Headleys, etc., are generating. The Scientology bubble will burst big time shortly. Also in the mainstream media, keep the pressure on. AA Run. Thank you so very much. And also, the more the YouTube presence grows, the more I become convinced, actually, that mainstream media coverage of all of this is becoming increasingly irrelevant. Right? Like the new media has greater reach than legacy media. And so I'm not even one of these people who's sitting around complaining about why the mainstream media doesn't do more. I don't care about the mainstream media. I think we can pick up the slack. You know what I'm saying? Thank you, Peter. Okay, Lance Whitaker. What do we have here? I had a long conversation with Sarah from Bridge Publications. She said the disconnection stuff isn't something the church forces. She said she had been in for 30 years and is in the Sea Org. She sounded really nice. I wish I could talk her out. Yes, Lance. The thing is, that's exactly what you would expect them to say. They're not allowed to admit that something like, and it's interesting because she said, I was looking for the word forced disconnection. Usually Scientology will say there's no such thing as forced disconnection. There is, of course, they can't deny there's such a thing as disconnection because it's literally the name of the chapter in their own ethics book and the policy letters and everything. So, but that's okay. And most Sea Org members, especially ones that are dealing with the public, they're the forward-facing Sea Org members that deal with the public, their job is to be as cheerful and happy as possible. It's literally like their mission statement to put up a front, such a front that someone would go, oh my God, all those bad things we hear about the Scientologists couldn't possibly be true because Sarah's just such a nice girl. And that's true for any Scientology spokespeople. And it's also why you don't actually see any Scientology spokespeople anymore because you can only keep up that charade for so long before the facade cracks and falls down. But yeah, I mean, and if you're talking with someone from Bridge Publications, realize their job is to sell books. I mean, their job isn't to recruit you or anything. Their job is just to sell books. And because they end up dealing with a lot of non-Scientologists, they're going to have these canned answers, these canned responses when someone from the real world says something to them about some of the negative stuff that's out there about Scientology. So I wouldn't be surprised by that. Most people you deal with in Scientology are going to come across that way. Thank you very much for the question and very generous super chat. I appreciate that. Stacy says, any updates on Ben, Bob, Kendrew? I'm going blank on who Ben. Oh, Bob Ferris. Who is Ben? I don't know who you mean by Ben. There are updates, but it's not my place to give those updates at this point. But I do appreciate the question. When there is more information that can be shared, it will be shared. I absolutely promise you. Oh, it's Peter Van Sticht. Really? Okay. Peter Van Sticht. Peter Van Sticht. Awesome. Thank you for that, guys. Guys, I'm in quite a mood today. I've got a lot of energy and I've got a list of like 3 or 4 more videos that I want to do, and I'm really motivated to get them done. So stay tuned, guys. Hit that like button if you haven't already, guys. If you're one of the 2,500 people watching live, please do hit that like button. It actually does help. Oh, Ben Rinder. Guys, we were never there was never any information about Ben I was going to make public. Any information we got about Ben was just from Mike. So all right, guys, stay tuned. Hit that like button if you don't mind. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And thanks to everyone who watches until the very end. And I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe